Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started now. I'm Kristen Berdar. I'm a partner with BST. We, as a financial and management consulting firm, BST approaches every client relationship to build trust and provide continuous consulting and advising at every step of our journey. Our approach is service-driven and collaborative. We actively work together with our clients to make informed, confident decisions. I'm Kristen Berdar, as I said. I'm a partner with our firm and the leader of our Virtual Accounting Solutions division, where we provide real-time information and data to help you run your business more efficiently and effectively. So today we have with us, we've been doing these webinars for a little while now, and today we have with us Jon Schwalb. He is and he works at Repeat Business Solutions. And Jon, I'm going to let you say a few words about yourself.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jonathan Schwalb. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Repeat Business Systems. Been in the computing consulting business for the last 25 years, 10 years with Repeat. And Repeat is a technology partner where we also help our clients make informed decisions. A very important aspect of computing today, since there is so much complexity. And today's topic of moving resources to the cloud is something I think everyone's facing. And I think there's things that we can do to help make pretty good decisions.
I would agree. And, you know, today, I was just going to say today's topic, we've covered a few topics in some of these webinar series. One was on internal controls. That was in a remote environment. That was a very popular topic as well. But today's topic of security concerns in the cloud, I think, is going to be fascinating for a lot of, small business owners and a lot of people out there. So why don't we start today? And I would encourage everybody, if you have a question, we'll be checking the Q&A, and the chat. So feel free to, put whatever questions. We'll try to leave some time at the end to answer those, or we'll jump in and try to address them as we have this conversation. But why don't we start with, what is the cloud? A very simple question, as well as, why would somebody feel that they should be moving to the cloud? They might hear a lot about it, and maybe they don't even know what it is, and why do they need to be there?
Sure. So the cloud is really the practice of using a network of remote servers hosted in the internet to store, manage, and process data, rather than a local server environment. And there's lots of advantages to it. Small businesses really don't want to be, unless they're in the computer business, don't really want to be in the computer business. They'd rather be in their own business and make sure they focus their energy on this. And just as we outsource many other functions of our business, couldn't we outsource our function for a particular server requirement? And that's really where the cloud comes into play. From a security perspective, the real thing that we have to realize is that whether it's in our house or in the cloud, we have to be the stewards of protecting that information that is the information we use day in, day out. And with the cloud, there's a certain amount of risk, but with a server environment, there's also a certain amount of risk. And I think it's important that we look at what those ideas are. What are we trying to protect? There's this thing in computing security called the triad. It's made up of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The three things that are at the center of what security does for us to mitigate risk. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we keep our data confidential, that it's only accessed by those people who are allowed to access it, and that it's available to us all the time when we need it. Because without those three things, we're not providing our business with the tools that it needs to perform its daily actions. As such, when people make decisions about moving to the cloud, if they keep that triad in mind, they can make some decisions. How will this affect my confidentiality? How will it affect the integrity of my data? And how will it affect the availability of our data? And so there's a certain play that occurs where you get improvements on some things where you can control them, and less, actually more reliance on your cloud service provider on other things. And that's the balance that you have to strike when you make the decision, do I move this to the cloud? So there are lots of factors. When we talk about risk, risk is anything that can negatively impact an organization financially. And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, direct financial. Reputation, for example, is a huge risk when there's a security breach or a data is compromised. And so we want to protect that element of the organizational asset. So when we make decisions about moving to the cloud, we have to know, does our cloud service provider have a security policy that we feel aligns with our own policy? Do we realize that we're going to be able to maintain our confidentiality, our integrity, and our availability? And those are the decision factors that are made when we make decisions about moving to the cloud. Now, not to get too far off topic on the question of the cloud, but the cloud is, there's a lot to it.
Well, I was going to expand on just for one second, as we're trying to make these decisions as far as providing and ensuring our integrity and trying to balance our risk, right? I know that there's a cost factor in all of that too for people, and that they have to try to balance their risk with their cost. And I'm sure cheaper is not always better. The most expensive is not always the best either sometimes. So how do you, in trying to balance your risk to maintain your integrity and to fulfill this triad that you're, talking about, how do they balance a cost and look at that?
Absolutely. So, just like any risk, there is a way to control the risk. You might not be able to eliminate risk completely, but you can control the economic impact of that risk should it become realized. And that tolerance is called just that, risk tolerance. How much tolerance can an organization take for the amount of risk that they're going to put themselves out for? So an example would be fire insurance policy. If a building is worth $100,000 and we insure it for $100,000 and the insurance policy costs $150,000, then it really doesn't make sense to buy the insurance policy because the control costs more than the risk. And what we want to do is we want to be able to figure out what your risk appetite is, how much risk is the organization really willing to assume, and put in place controls that make it so that our risk appetite and the level of risk are at their nadir, at their minimums in both cases, so that we can make the most efficient decision. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a, boy, I hope everything goes well kind of decision, or I want to do it less expensively. It can be a quantitative decision that we can make strategically and decide based on our known risk, what the cost would be and the cost of control, we can find the best solution for that risk.
Sounds like a whole lot of decisions need to be made. And I know that COVID hasn't been easy for anybody, anybody's business or even individuals, right? And everybody is now all of a sudden been engaged in these remote environments. So I would assume, and I know at our own firm, right, we had to look at what our risks were with sending everybody home. Now, fortunately for us, right, we all have laptops, we all had a very sound structure in place, but there are a lot of businesses that I'm sure were like, okay, now everybody just go home and try to work from there. So how do you balance the remote environment where people are on either a laptop and they're, I say dialing in, that's not the right word, connecting through a VPN. Right? Using a VPN, using, today's technology through, Cisco and through other, servers. And how do you balance that with somebody who might not have a laptop connecting at a work environment and now just wants to connect to their computer that's, a desktop that's sitting at a different location? Where does that risk come to play?
So there's no real standard per se that says this is the way it has to be done. But again, we look at that risk model and we try to make some decisions on whether or not the risk is worth the reward. And if getting an employee to connect remotely from a remote location requires a certain amount of control, then we think it's worth it. So let's give examples. Do we want to allow people to BYOD, bring their own device, bring your own device,
Yep.
right?
We hear that a lot.
So, yeah. So the question, the answer is probably not if we're going to use a VPN connection. We really don't know where their laptop has been, and we value the information that's stored on our network. Remember the CIA, we want to make sure we, adhere to that ideology that protects that information. And since we don't protect the device that's accessing at the endpoint, it's a little risky, and pretty, actually very risky, to allow that to connect to our network unfettered. So what do I mean by that? If we allow a remote user to connect with a VPN client, theoretically their network and our network, the network that they're joining to, it becomes one network. And any of the bad things that might be on an unprotected network could make their way to the protected network. And that's really a risk not worth taking. So there are some alternatives. Some of the alternatives are things like LogMeIn or Go to My PC. These are remote connecting tools that allow you to take over a remote desktop without having a network connection. So you still need to connect to the internet, but basically what happens is the PC at work connects to LogMeIn, and the person at home connects to LogMeIn, and the connection is made up here, not this way, across from the computer to the network. And as such, you're protected from the bad things that might be on people's laptops. Of course, that comes at a monthly cost, and it's a recurring cost. So then the question becomes, maybe it's worth it to purchase a laptop. It doesn't have to be a high-end laptop, because remember, we're just grabbing the screenshots, a remote desktop session from our computer at work. So there's lots of options that businesses are taking on to address this issue. BYOD is probably the lowest in what we would consider a realistic option. An option in the middle is something like LogMeIn or Go to My PC. And an option above that, and something that's kind of new, is moving infrastructure to the cloud. So as we have cloud services, perhaps we could put all of our servers in the cloud, not just an application or a software as a service. If we had all of our information in the cloud and we had endpoints that people could take with them that we protect, then they can access that information anywhere, anytime, and it's all protected. So there's lots of options. It really depends, again, upon risk appetite. We're talking about BYOD down at the bottom and infrastructure in the cloud up at the top, and the cost varies between the two.
And when we look at solutions like a LogMeIn or Go to My PC, I think that, because we've done that with some of our clients, right? Because we're not going to take our network, our VPN, and connect to their network if they have an accounting package that's on a server at their location, right? If their accounting package is not already cloud-based, then we have to try to connect to it somehow. One of our biggest concerns, and usually one of the complaints from my associates and my staff, is that it's slow, right? Like now you're trying to deal with, like I've got to go log into a PC, and now I'm on different. How does the is it just an internet speed issue, or is it their network speed issue? Where does that fall into all of?
Kind of a complex question. A couple of answers.
I didn't mean for it to be.
No, that's okay. It's a good question, but there's different sides to the puzzle. The first thing is, yes, it's going to be slower than working in the office because you are working remotely. And because LogMeIn goes through a third party, it is a little bit slower than a remote desktop session. So ultimately, that's a cost of that control. We have a cost. It's not a financial cost, except that, what's the cost of an FTE and how much time are we really losing working remotely? Beyond that, though, typical bottlenecks in internet speed have to do with residential internet. Residential internet is asymmetrical, meaning that its download speed is going to be faster than its upload speed. And when this happens and you have that asymmetry, we get commands that we have to type up to the cloud or into our remote PC. And if you ever notice, you start typing and you type, and then all of a sudden all the letters come across, That would
Yeah.
be an example of latency associated with upload speed. And it typically is you know, the home user. The corporate network would typically have symmetrical internet, typically delivered on fiber. Of course, now fiber is becoming more ubiquitous, and things like Verizon Fios is making fiber available for home networks. And all of a sudden, 100 megabit up down for a residential user is, you know, $79 a month, remarkably inexpensive compared to what it would have been 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't want to shift too much, but I do want to make sure that we have time to address this. And so I know that COVID kind of came and took over the world, right? PPP loans took over the world. Trying cash flow projections from my standpoint were, you know, a thing. But at the same time that all of that was happening, New York State passed the New York Shield Act. And, you know, probably it didn't get the publicity and the press time that it probably should have gotten. So I want to make sure that we kind of, you know, talk about how does the Shield Act allow us to use the cloud for work applications? What are the limitations?
Yeah, so no doubt a big thing that happened. It was actually passed in August of 2019, but it didn't go into effect until March 21st of 2020. And of course, March 20th, 2020, the world was changing. So, you know, while it doesn't mandate specific safeguards, it does provide that a business will be deemed compliant with the Shield Act after instituting a data security program with certain key elements. Those key elements include designating an employee or employees to coordinate the data security program, training and managing employees in security program practice procedures, assessing internal and external risks and
Looks like maybe John has frozen. What would a technology webinar be without a little technology glitch, right? Let's see if we can get him back. I'd love to be able to finish his sentence for him, but I'm not quite there.
Oh,
here he
there we go.
comes. He's back.
Yeah.
I was just saying I'd love to be able to finish your sentence for you, but I'm not sure
No,
what
that's okay.
Say.
So while this kind of mimics the HIPAA and other compliance standards, in New York State, they've really stepped it up here, taking the idea that businesses need to be responsible for the data that they maintain. So when it comes to cloud computing, one of the things that you want to make sure you have is that agreement with your service provider. In this case, it would be a CSP, a cloud service provider, that they're going to contractually safeguard your information. And we kind of take that for granted, but it's something that really needs to be codified in order to fulfill the elements of the New York Shield Act. And this would include, you know, when making that decision about moving to the cloud, not just for Shield, but for your own safeguard, to be familiar with the security and privacy policies of the vendor that you're utilizing, because this is your data and you want to protect it. And we want to know that these guys are contractually obligated to notify you about a breach. Breaches happen. And what we don't want to have happen is not be notified. And so this contractual obligation as part of the Shield Act, one of its requirements is that should there be a supply chain breach, something above us that's delivering services to us breach, they are required contractually to notify us of the scope and breadth of the breach so that we can react as well.
And so you bring up a really great point on breaches, right? Because recently in the news, right, there's been a host of them, but you know, we all kind of heard about the SolarWinds compromise, right? So
yes.
and even I even received we use a cloud-based solution, right, that was not impacted by it, fortunately, but they even reached out from their end to see if any of the users of that solution were impacted by it, and they just wanted to try to, take inventory of what was going on. And fortunately for us, it didn't impact anything that we do. But how do you think, how should that, we hear about all these breaches, how does that play into our, influencing our decision, right? Is it, I have some clients that want to still write manual checks because they don't want, any electronic. And then I've got some that the more the better, right? And how do you balance that in your decision?
Well, first, in the SolarWinds instance, a great example of a supply chain compromise. Here is a software company that supplies a software to multiple government entities, very large businesses, and bad actors got into their development platform and inserted some code into an update. And that code gave these bad actors access to the machines that this code was installed on. Now, when it was released by SolarWinds, they didn't realize that that code was embedded in the update. And, network administrators diligently updated their systems with this update. And in doing so, gave the bad actors access to their systems. I mean, remarkably bad stuff. I think, though, from the perspective of this conversation, that is an example of where SolarWinds did what they had to do. As soon as they were made aware of this, they worked to rectify the situation, to mitigate the vulnerability, to get everyone notified about what occurred. And that's the type of reaction that we need to see. Now, SolarWinds is not off the hook here. There's going to be congressional investigations into this. This was a really big thing. 1,800 government agencies were affected. About 20,000 businesses were affected. It's a really, and these are all large businesses because this platform was a very expensive platform. So that's that side of things. But as far as the idea of a perfect system, there's no such thing as a perfect system. So whether it's in your office, and in this case, this wasn't a cloud-based service. This was something that was delivered to businesses to use on-prem, not to access something remotely. There is no such thing as a safe system. A guy named Stafford, a professor of data security, said the only secure system in his mind would be one that was turned off, encased in concrete, surrounded by barbed wire, guarded with men with machine guns. And even then, he had his doubts. And that's the idea, is that if we are to assume some risk, we want to do things like make sure we have vendor agreements and make sure we're practicing, safe remote access, those types of things to ensure that we give ourselves the best success at protecting our data.
So is there any, I know as we're getting towards the end of this, is there any concerns that we should be considering as small business owners in making our decision to go to the cloud? Like, is there that one or two, what are the one or two key takeaways that maybe somebody, who's listening could have on, okay, I'm thinking about it and I'm, like to use cloud-based solutions, but I'm not sure, what's the one or two points that they should take away to make sure that they're trying to, evaluate their risk?
So it's really important to have a reputable provider who's going to be your CSP. One of the things that is great about cloud computing from a reputable provider is that they can spread the expense of security across multiple clients. And so they'll spend a lot more on security than you can in your organization because you can't justify that level of expense for the organization in a single entity. But if we can spread that cost amongst multiple entities, then all of a sudden it can become a little bit more consumable. And so, you got to look at Microsoft. I read a stat the other day that said Microsoft fends off 7 trillion attacks a day. 7 trillion attacks. But they also spend $2 billion a year on security. Right. And so they have that capability because of their size. So that's one thing. Everyone's worried about security, but really there might be benefit to the cloud in that they're aware of that, risk, and they're putting a lot of control to help mitigate it. On the converse side of that, it's a very complex thing. So there's lots of areas of accountability. We have to be aware of the data that's in transit. We have to be aware of the data that's at rest in the cloud service provider. And we have to make sure that everything is secured along the way. Whereas if it's in our own office, we can say, hey, we have to protect the edge, but what's inside our office, we can maintain, provided we don't allow any bad actors in, and keep it secure. So it's a balancing game is really the best thing. And what we want to do is make a list of the pros and the cons and make an informed business decision. Keeping in mind that idea of protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and looking at what the risk and reward is to it. A lot less upfront costs, because we don't have to build servers and server rooms to create applications that in the cloud can be pretty robust. Accounting servers can be expensive. If you look at a Sage 300 CRE server, it needs a lot of memory, a lot of CPU. In the cloud, it's a monthly charge as opposed to, a one-time big hit in the beginning of a project like that. So it really is a balancing act.
Well, and there's ongoing cost and time too, right? We use,
sure.
I know in our outsourcing practice, my main software of choice is Sage Intacct, right? So, which is a cloud-based solution. They do, we have obviously user conferences. We have a roadmap of what the updates are going to be. They handle all of the updates because they're all done in the cloud. I don't have to worry about any of that. I attend a webinar on what those updates are and how they impact our day-to-day life. And that's about it. I don't have to pay an IT company to come in and install an update and maintain it and worry about, other integrations and other applications that connect to it. That's all done at their end behind the scenes. So there are definitely some pros and cons. And, we mandate two-factor authentication when we connect to those things. I mean, I can't go anywhere without my cell phone. and I get codes. At the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I had 12 text messages. And then I realized they were all just codes that came to me throughout the day. Everything we do has that, either, emailing to us, or within that. I can't stress that enough, that if that is an option, I mean, we've actually paid for upgraded levels of software because the upgraded levels offer the two-factor authentication at the enterprise level and maybe not at the lower level. So I think that that's something that, from our standpoint, we've always, been encouraged to do. And I think that, it's been, businesses just need to, again, look at the risk. Like we can't stress that enough with the reward, right? There are a lot of rewards that come with moving to the cloud.
Yeah, and having a consultant who is able to help you make those informed decisions, understand the cost and the benefit to controls that help mitigate risk, really puts a business in a situation where they don't have to rely on luck to be successful. Nothing wrong with being lucky, but you don't want to have to rely on it. And that's the idea here, is let's create a solution that shows that we've made an effort to do the things we need to do to protect our data and maintain its integrity.
So at this time, I'd like to open up to any questions that you guys might have in the Q&A or in the chat. I don't see any. You did such a great job, John, that I don't see any other questions coming in, which is kind of good because we were talking right along and it is just about, and I want to be definitely respectful of everybody's time today. Any last, words of wisdom? I know Repeat has been an excellent resource and client of our firm for a really long time. I can't say enough great things about your company.
Thank you.
Anything that last bit of words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we certainly, the cloud is here to stay, and everyone's going to have some component of their business located in the cloud. I don't know that the idea of an all or nothing approach is the best way to look at this. As you move to the cloud, just make sure that we make good decisions about security, because that really needs to be the cornerstone of IT decisions, especially in light of the environment we're in today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, please feel free to find me at our brand new website, www.bstco.com. Under the partner section, you can find my email, and Jon would be available too from Repeat Business. Is there an email that you would like to share with anybody, or
Sure,
phone number for the business?
First initial, last name, J Schwalb at rbs-usa.com. And it's rbs-usa.com website.
Thank
All
you
the
so
information's
much.
all there as well. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.